think about when they attached in the COVID relief bill 180 days for the CIA to release all the information they have about the UFOs? Did you see that?
That's one of the things I love about this.
We can go from there.
Oh my God. It's
yeah,
fantastic.
we can't be taken seriously that way.
No. But I will say this. I tell people this all the time. They say, why is it so entertaining? I say, because he's curious about everything. He's genuinely curious about everything. And it's a good question. Look, I'm happy that when it comes to UFOs, there's a lot of things that the agency needs to keep, off the radar, right? For source methods, right? It's a need to know issue. And frankly, again, going back to what's in the U.S. best interest, for that day when China decides to release all of their intel operations and information, then great. Maybe it's time for us to be transparent. But that's not the way the world works.
Do you think that's what it is? Of it is just secret programs, defense vehicles?
Well, no, what I'm saying is in terms of the UFO thing? A great portion of it is. Yeah, a great portion of it is
50%?
Oh, now the 47% actually. But anybody said that, that's well known inside the community. Look, I think it's good because I think it's for the same reason the Pentagon released the information about ATIP, about the Advanced Aeronautical Threat Identification Program. I think it's actually good. There's no reason why we shouldn't, unless you are talking about developmental aircraft as an example, right? Which is important. Because whether you're talking about hypersonic aircraft or missiles or whatever it is, there's some stuff that needs to be kept off the radar screen because there is a tremendous competition going on right now particularly for things like control of space. That's going to be a huge issue, right? Yeah. Because the weaponization of space. For a long time, people were thinking, space, it's a great exploration and it's good for mankind. And frankly, there is a race to figure out how to weaponize space. And so, as an example of what we're talking about, the idea of just saying, we're going to open the books as a country and reveal all our information about developmental aircraft as an example, that's the wrong move, right?
Do you think there are incredible stories, whether it's from Commander David Fravor, who saw that Tic Tac vehicle off the coast of San Diego, or whatever video?
Yeah. If I had to point to one, I would say Fravor. Yeah. I would say without a doubt, I'd say the one that, if I were somebody who's looking for some redemption, because I've been beating the drum about UFOs and nobody's ever believed me, they always roll their eyes, I would say the one thing that would give them comfort would be the incident with Commander Fravor and that sighting. Mm-hmm. That's one that I have yet to see an explanation for that makes any sense.
Well, not only that, there's Practice.
Yeah.
Like there's
and
then also it blocked their radar systems, which is an act of war. It actively jammed radar systems. It's not simple as like they saw something they didn't know what it was. Like they tracked this thing going from I think it was close to 80,000 feet above sea level to down in 1 second.
Yeah, no signs of motion.
Yeah,
no heat signatures, nothing. Right, and it was a. Yeah, it's one of those things you look at and you go, okay. And look, the ATIP program made sense in the sense that, if a nation is out there, if the Chinese are out there, or the Russians, or whomever, and they're developing propulsion capability that we don't know about, then we should have a mechanism within the Pentagon, within the intel community, to understand what that is. Let's research it, let's investigate, right? And so oftentimes, they come to a logical conclusion. The Fravor incident, I have yet to see any information that explains it, right? So that to me, and also, as you pointed out, the way that it was tracked, the verification of it from very credible, individuals, that to me is like the prime example.
And they have video footage of this thing too.
Yes,
and then on top
and they
of
have gun camera footage that's
saying
incredible.
that these things are fairly common, that they're seeing them every couple of weeks. Yeah. They were seeing them, and when Fravor's like, "Hey guys, what the fuck is this?" and they're like, "Yeah, you see it?
Yeah,
we've been seeing these things."
And there's no side for somebody like that, a very well respected, aviator. With great experience, there's no upside for these guys to come forward, right? In fact, there's pressure to not, because it's not necessarily good for your career, right? To come in and say, "I think I saw a UFO," right?
What do you think is going?
I don't know. We've talked about that before. I'm not,
I'm trying to get the right. Forget what you said before.
Yeah, I know, right? You forgot about the damn bet. I shouldn't have opened my mouth. I know. I'll go back to that, though. They would have called me out. If Trump comes back and runs, they would have said, oh, you owe him $1,000.
Can't wait to get that Screaming Eagle in here that I'm going to buy.
I'm going to I'll buy it for you with them, and I'll put a little plaque on there to say where it came from.
Big bronze eagle.
I know, big. Oh, God. I've got one. I gave a speech one for a Veterans Day event, and it was very kind. They gave me this big eagle. I keep it in my office now. It's fantastic. I keep it in the background when I do news segments from my office, and it's like perched over my shoulder.
Nice.
You got to have one in here. Anyway, I don't know.
You think about it at all?
Yeah, I do. In the terms of and like I said, with Black Files Declassified coming up, I just got another plug-in. We're going to do an episode
That's on the
Discovery Channel, and you know what? You can see the entire first season on Discovery Plus. So I think it's foolish to discount these things because there's so much we don't know, right? So and the idea of thinking that somehow we're the only credible life forms out there, I think is ridiculous. So I think there's a high possibility that that there's yes, I do think that, but at the same time, then I also question sort of the way that. That's great. If some alien life force with amazing technology that we can't even fathom right now comes to visit us, then what the hell are they doing? Are they just sort of like watching us just for the entertainment value? Or what? So I'm always puzzled by that part. Like, the idea that, I don't know.
Well, they probably want to observe, but they won't want to interfere. Mm-hmm. There's probably, if they're super advanced, they probably realize there's a process that intelligent life goes through where there's stages of their evolutionary development in terms of use of technology, understanding of each other, mitigation of war and conflict, and then ultimately entrance into the Galactic Federation. Please tell people your credentials, what your background is.
So, my name is Ryan Graves. I have an engineering degree, mechanical and aerospace engineering. I promptly left doing that to go fly F-18s for the Navy as soon as I graduated college. Did that for about a decade. Both operationally in combat as well as an instructor role, teaching the new students. And, we did witness something while we were flying in our jets, but, we were doing it we witnessed it in the context of our just everyday flying in our missions.
And what year was it that you witnessed it?
So we started seeing these in 2014 was the earliest that I know. 2013, late 2013, early 2014.
Could you describe what was the very first experience?
Yeah, so for me personally, the experience was simply just flying out to the area like I would any other day. And instead of seeing an empty airspace with just my wing person or another squadron doing something a different block, there were all of a sudden a lot of different radar contacts, which is immediately a problem because, we could be hitting one of those or someone working in our area. And this was happening because we upgraded our radar the best we could tell. We were in a earlier radar called the APG-73, and we had come back from deployment. We entered a maintenance phase, it's called. We kind of do a little bit less flying, upgrade the jets if we need to, do any long-lasting maintenance, and we upgraded to the APG-79, which was a much better radar.
And what is the difference in the abilities of the upgraded radar system versus the original system?
So, kind of practically speaking, it's like going from an analog TV essentially to like an OLED. It's, a modern tool compared to more of like an analog classical radar that has more limited range and has less ability to track multiple targets and things of that nature. So just generally speaking, we would expect to see, more objects if there were any out there or smaller objects, but there shouldn't have been any objects out there.
And so how far offshore are you when this is all going down?
Our working areas start about 10 miles off the coast, and then it goes out 100 or 250 miles or so, though we don't usually use those far eastern areas. But we would only see them over the water. So they would really only be in our working areas, maybe slightly, in between the working area and land, but never over the land, sometimes over the bays that are in the area that are quite large. But never just kind of zooming west over land or anything like that.
It's restricted airspace?
It's not. So that's a tricky question. For us operating in a military operating area, it is not restricted in the sense that you have to be, there's only one person allowed in there. You could have these little Cessnas kind of bumbling in there, but they would get called out pretty quick both from the kind of air traffic control agency that's working out there, as well as the F-18s and the other aircraft that may be working out there. But in a broader sense, when we look at it in relation to our air defense identification zone, which is essentially a band of airspace that surrounds our entire country, if your flight path originates out over the water outside of that ADIZ and you proceed into that ADIZ, into our controlled airspace, then you do have to essentially have permission to enter that airspace. It's not a restricted airspace like a traditional bombing range, but it is protected airspace. It's our coastal air.
So you have this upgraded radar system, and what are you detecting?
So on the radar, really what we can learn from that is essentially the kinematics of the object. So where is it essentially, and what direction is it going, how fast is it going, things of that nature. We can't necessarily make out the shape or things of that nature. So it's a representation. It's like a block on our screen to show that information. And so when we see that on our radar, we can tell, where it's located, perhaps what's located around it if there's other objects we're detecting, how fast it's going, what direction it's pointed in, what direction it's traveling in. So we call that velocity vector. So if we see this essentially little circle, it'll have a tail coming off of it. And that tail kind of represents the nose of the vehicle, at least as its flight path is going. And so with that, we would typically see an aircraft just kind of trudging along with a straight line, taking occasional turns. But these objects had a little bit more of a, I don't want to say random, but more less controlled flight path. That velocity vector would kind of jump around a bit more. They would not proceed in like a perfectly straight line as you would imagine like a flight navigation computer would take you, right? It takes you from A to B in the straightest line possible. These objects seem to kind of be moving in a direction that was not a straight line, but generally proceeding in that direction. And so they would kind of be meandering slightly, but moving in that general direction, both three-dimensionally and horizontally.
So being around, going up, going down. Mm-hmm. So they're not on a flat plane, and they're not going in a straight line.
I don't want to draw too many firm statements like that because we would see them being flat, too. We'd see them perfectly stationary up there, regardless of the wind.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow.
Oh, gosh. I mean, at altitude, you can have anywhere up to 100, 120 knots of airspeed.
What is that in miles per hour?
It's about 130, 140 miles an hour.
So they're completely stationary with 140 mile an hour wind.
Confusing to me as well. Even if we had something that could just burn that much energy, right? Like if you had a sphere surrounded by little rockets, right? Just imagining something right now.
Okay.
And if you wanted to keep that perfectly stationary, right, against gravity, you could just fire all the rockets at the bottom really fast and hopefully keep it flat, right?
Right.
It's going to have tiny little variations. And then if you have wind hitting it and all this, you could potentially have those rockets try to counter it, but it would never be perfectly still in winds like that.
Because it's not perfectly still either, right?
Exactly.
It changes and varies.
It does. So it's like it's the wind. It's not even really fighting the wind, it seems. It just seems like it's just there in a way.
So the first time you see these things, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, the first time really was, well, what is this, right? It's not a UFO or something mysterious at this point. It's at what we're thinking at this point we see on the radar is just, well, our radar is broken, right? These perhaps don't represent physical objects yet because we hadn't, visually seen these or seen them on our camera yet. And so, we kind of like, hey, what's going on here? Is anyone else seeing this kind of thing? But not really like investigating it, right? It's just kind of like, all right, there was stuff out there, but maybe next time we'll take a look. But the way our systems work, when we have all these contacts on our radar, and if we kind of just select one out with our little cursor there, all our sensors go to it. Our FLIR goes to it, which is our camera system. All our weapons, they have like their own little eyes in some sense, and they all look in that direction. And so eventually, someone had one of these selected and flew close enough so that as they look at their FLIR system, their camera, they could see something that was at the spot represented on the radar, right? So there was something there.
So they were seeing it visually with eyes?
Not at this point, just on the FLIR system.
The FLIR system.
And so it's a regular camera and also an infrared camera. And so typically we'll roll around in infrared just because it returns a better image, typically. So So yeah, it didn't look like an object they were seeing on the FLIR. It just looked like a source of IR energy in a sense, almost as if someone was shining a flashlight. But something had to be there to be reflecting that energy or creating it. So at this point, to answer your question, now we're like, okay, this isn't just an error in our radar. This is perhaps, we're thinking this is real. We have to really respect this as like a safety hazard now. Even if it's just a small, however small ribbon of tinfoil, right? Like that suck down the engine can still take out an aircraft, right? So we have to be very respectful of that.
Like a balloon type thing. But how fast are these things going?
So sometimes stationary, right? Sometimes they would be going around 0.6 to 0.8 Mach, which is at altitude about, 240 to maybe 330 knots, around there.
So we're in the range of an airplane.
A fighter aircraft would be kind of flying around at those airspeeds, except sometimes they would be perfectly stationary as well.
Right. It's not exhibiting any sort of patterns that you've recognized in the past.
No, they have actually. So,
But not stationary, no, right?
For the stationary, no. With the meandering kind of flight path, no. But I would also see them essentially fly what we call a racetrack pattern. And essentially what that means is they fly in a straight path, and then they do like a 180-degree turn in a certain direction. Then they fly a straight path, then turn again. So that's what we call a racetrack pattern as opposed to a circular holding pattern. We did witness racetrack patterns. In fact, I think there's been some cases off the West Coast just the past couple of weeks where people have also been observing objects flying in racetrack patterns high at altitude with lights. So I do recognize that behavior, but I don't necessarily think that means we have to attribute it to normal behavior necessarily. That type of flight path is important because it's a very efficient way to fly, right? If you have to maintain the position in a certain area, you want to minimize how much you're turning. Because anytime you're turning in an aircraft, you're using more energy than if you were just flying straight and level. And so by having a racetrack pattern, it's an efficient way of holding in a position by maximizing straight and level time and minimizing your turn time.
And how long would these things stay up there for?
So from our experience, and again, we weren't studying these, but they were always out there. They were out there when we took off, we'd see them, and then we go to land, they would still be out there.
Every day?
Every day.
Every day?
Every day.
So you guys go from not having any idea that these things are out there to an upgraded radar system to seeing them every day. What is the thought? Like, how are you feeling when these, is there an evolution of the thought pattern of how you're addressing these things and thinking about them? Initially, you're thinking they're errors. When do you start getting a thought that, what the fuck is this thing?
So that happened when we visually saw one. And the first time we visually saw one, the object was directly at what we call the entry point of the area. So, that box that I told you about in the sky that starts 10 miles off the coast, there's a particular GPS, location and altitude where incoming traffic will fly in and outbound traffic will fly in the exact same spot, but will fly out 1,000 feet lower. There were two aircraft from my squadron, VFA 11, and they flew, took off as a flight of two. That means they're essentially flying in a formation like this. And as they hit the area, one of these objects went right between the aircraft. The lead air crew saw the object. The Dash 2 aircraft crew did not, which is not surprising because they're usually, you're very focused on flying formation. You're just staring right at that aircraft. The lead really has actual leeway to look around. So he saw it, and, he immediately came back. I have to assume he didn't have it on his radar because he wouldn't have flown through this object at the entrance point. He turned around, flew back, landed, and I was in the ready room when he come back, and he had all his gear on, which typically is not a good thing because you want to get that stuff off as fast as possible. So usually means there's a problem of some nature, and he was just sitting there saying, "Hey, I almost hit one of those damn things." And we all knew what he was referring to, even though we didn't necessarily have a name for it, just because we were seeing these so much. And he described it. He described it just as a black or dark gray cube, and that cube was inside of a clear or translucent sphere. And essentially, the apex or the corners of that cube, best he could tell, were touching that inside of that sphere.
That description mirrors many of the descriptions that people have had of these whatever you want to call them. Whether they're calling them UAPs now for some strange reason. UFOs is I don't know. Does it have a dirty connotation to it? And is it tainted because of so many crazy people talk about UFOs? Is that what it is?
With a lot of assumptions baked in.
It baked in. So that's something. But whatever it is, that is a design that people have reported seeing before. That this translucent sphere and this cube. Can you see through the cube?
Not to my understanding, no.
Some sort of solid black cube that's inside this translucent sphere, and it's just floating around and flying around the sky.
So, that's a good point. Is it floating around? Is it flying around? It's doing both, which is strange, right? Because you could think of that description and go, okay, that's kind of some kind of weird balloon maybe with stuff in it. And that's certainly, one way. If you just view that angle of it, then it seems explainable. But when that, the balloon-like object starts cruising around at, 0.8 Mach, that nullifies that particular idea. And you'll see that a lot, where it's not just like that one picture, that one behavior. It's really, you kind of have to zoom out a bit and look at everything in relation to each other and say, okay, why is this weird? Okay, it was hanging out in a racetrack pattern. That's not exotic. But when you learn it was doing it for, perhaps 13 hours.
13 hours?
Perhaps they were out there all the time, So, I land and I go back. And we weren't on a Intel mission to analyze these, right? We're going to do our training. It's very expensive, $30K an hour to fly these things, right? So really the only time we can put energy into looking at these things is when we're kind of transiting back and forth or waiting for a fight to start. And so, it's never like a dedicated analysis.
Get interested in the subject of UFOs.
That happened at a surprisingly early age. I was 7 years old at a boarding school, and the principal of the school, a friend of his, had photographed video, an old reel-to-reel Kodak movie camera, had taken a home movie of a video of a UFO flying in beautiful blue skies, cumulus clouds, huge golden disc that comes into the picture and banks, goes into a cloud, and it disappears into this sort of wispy cloud in a way that would be very, very hard, I think, to fake somehow, particularly in those days with no computer-generated imagery. And it comes out the other side and then sort of goes off over the horizon. And I was, stunned and flabbergasted, and myself and all the other kids ran outside that night and were looking at the stars, and it just sparked my curiosity, a lifelong curiosity.
Once you got into government, and once you were there, you're basically there, you had to start asking questions like, did you wait a while? Like, how long did you ask for?
Sure did.
Hey, what do you guys know?
Well, for a long time I waited. Very rarely. I looked for openings. I looked for opportunities. So, for example, the stigma is so great that you're reluctant, obviously, to raise that issue. A couple times there were some natural opportunities. So one of my colleagues on the Intelligence Committee was going to Hawaii for some oversight trips, meetings, and he went to the Maui Space Optical Tracking Facility. And I said to him, while you're there, why don't you just check and see, do they ever see anything weird they can't explain and so forth? So he did, and Pete called me up and said, hey, you wouldn't believe this. I've got this videotape here, and it shows these weird things. And so I talked to the Air Force people. They sent the tape to us. Turns out it was totally unclassified. I showed it to Senator Cohen and some others, and it ended up on national TV, actually, but didn't generate any further response. Everybody just kind of threw their hands up in the air and said, well, that's interesting, but we don't know what to do with it. It was Ted Koppel's Nightline show that this tape was played on. It showed sort of 5 objects moving parallel to the ground, possibly in formation. They're in the atmosphere because they're burning, they're interacting with something. There's plasma coming off them, which wouldn't presumably be happening in space, but they seem to be too slow to be meteorites. So it was mystifying and difficult to explain, never did get an answer. Occasionally something like that would happen, but by and large, the issue almost never arose.
The issue is a weird issue because if you bring it up in the wrong company or at the wrong time, you could be dismissed as a loon. Did you feel that when you were there? Like as a person who had a budding interest in unidentified flying objects and what have you, did you feel like this is a politically risky thing to discuss, especially to discuss like in serious terms? Like, do you believe in these things? Like, what are they? What do we know? Was that an issue?
Absolutely. I concealed my interest in the topic for years and very carefully, and confided to a few trustworthy friends. Had a few heart-to-heart talks with a couple individuals when I found a fellow traveler who was interested in this topic, but by and large, absolutely wanted to conceal that and not reveal that.
You know Clinton?
No, I did
No,
not.
he would be the guy that I would go to.
There was a request that came to me once that I think was from President Clinton, and it was one of the astronauts claimed to have seen a UFO out at Edwards Air Force Base, and it was videotaped, he said. And he described this in his memoir and wanted the president to get hold of the tape, of the video. And Secretary Cohen came back to the Pentagon from a meeting, and a message came down to me to go to try to find this tape. And unfortunately, there was I got nowhere with that. The Air Force was adamant that there was no such tape, there was no such information. Anything they had on UFOs had been destroyed. So I had one of these situations that's very common in this area, which is you have just two apparently credible sources, but utterly conflicting, irreconcilable information, which seems to happen often in this field.
Being as you were in government and very close to literally the machine that runs the world, what's the general perception when people are discussing these things in Washington? What's the general perception of what's going on with these things?
I'm happy to say that it's changed. That perception has changed considerably in the last few years. People feel like they have permission to talk about it.
When did you...
And after the New York Times article and subsequent press, beginning in 2017, December 2017, and that sort of gave people permission to talk about this. And I've actually had Pentagon friends who said, this is kind of cool. We don't have to go in the closet to talk about this anymore.
What do you kept it in the closet before? Like, when did the stigma start? And do you think this was like intentionally sort of set up this way?
It was. It was the Robertson Panel Commission, 1953, and they concluded during those Cold War days that this was a potential threat to national security because UFO reports might overwhelm our air defense and communication system, and that the Soviets might spook the public and somehow manipulate this issue. So they actually advocated in writing that this issue be debunked and discredited, and the government went ahead and did so extremely successfully, unfortunately.
And this started with the Project Blue Book, correct?
Correct. It was during that era.
So what was the gentleman's name that was running Project Blue Book again?
Well, they were the astronomer, Alan Hynek.
Hynek.
Yeah.
And Hynek went on to become a believer. So he started debunking and was told, essentially, the way he reported it was that he was told to kind of debunk every single case. Everything he could find, whether it was swamp gas or, ball lightning, find some way to explain this away. But then once he left Project Blue Book, he started openly discussing these cases, and he started discussing his own belief.
Correct. And he felt badly burned as well because he was trying to carry out his mandate that the Air Force had given him. And as you may recall, in one instance, he went to Michigan and famously declared that the people of Michigan were misconstruing swamp gas for flying objects.
Yeah.
And so Gerald Ford, who was representing that district, got incensed, as did the local population, and Congress took a fleeting interest in the topic. And Dr. Hynek was very embarrassed, and understandably so. It was really quite insulting to these people who had very clear sightings of these objects. So he did eventually change his view publicly and was very critical of Project Blue Book.
Occasionally called by somebody from inside. And what I think they're doing first of all, one, we may be faking a UFO situation for reasons that I don't understand.
If we're making a UFO situation, do you think that there's technology that's available to people in the United States that is beyond our current understanding of what's possible?
90% no.
90.
Because
wow.
it's very hard. It's very hard to imagine physicists continuing to work on nothing for their entire careers. The number of people who are going to be retiring shortly, having never actually done physics as a physicist. We're talking about wasted lives. People are going to be very weird when they realize that they blew their entire career. And I believe I can say what many of these problems are. And if you want to humiliate me at a leading university, just ask me to talk. You can put it on video. You don't realize how many things the Standard Model has subtly wrong when we explain it to people. It's not that the Lagrangian is wrong, not that the rules are wrong, but we say wrong stuff. We say, like, there are 3 generations that are only of matter that are only distinguished by mass. In other words, there's 3 copies of this stuff here. This is like the wood version, and then there's the plastic version, and then there's the metal version. There aren't 3. There are 2 generations plus an extra imposter generation, which looks like a generation. I mean, I can get into these things. And that should be a provocation. Somebody says, let's call this guy up, have him out, and figure out what he's talking about. Doesn't matter. I don't think we're doing physics.
What he's doing?
I think we are playing paintball rather than going to war, and we're giving prizes for generals who command the best paintball army. And then we're referencing everyone else who's actually trying to figure out how to fight to, well, have you submitted to the paintball competition? It's like, no, I don't want to do paintball. I understand that it keeps your skills up. I understand that some of them are transferable. But I mean, like, you've been in street fights?
Not since I was.
Yeah, well, I understand. Like, I haven't been for a long time. It's different than what you guys do in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There's lots of stuff you're not allowed to do.
Yeah.
Right. You get in a street fight, it's a completely different thing.
Sure.
What we're doing is not physics in the same sense.
So what they're doing is
we're doing safe stuff. Yeah, exactly.
They're exercising.
And the exercises are keeping people limber. They're keeping people in a fighting mentality. It's not that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has nothing to do with fighting. We've seen people use it in the street for sure, right? But small joint manipulation is part of street fighting. Eye gouging is part of street fighting. Pulling a knife is part of street fighting. These things are not part of any reputable gym that you might go to. So I want to do the thing that isn't paintball. And I didn't want to do it up until recently because the danger of unleashing a neutron on the world is so high. Now I realize I'm done with that. You guys are willing to play footsies with Putin? You're not going to survive. You're not the responsible adults I thought you were. Like, if I unleash a neutron and it leads to some sort of proliferation of deadly technology, it's on you. It's not on me. You're already taking risks that you shouldn't be taking.
So if you think 90% sure that this is not coming from here, you believe this because you don't think that the proper science in order to achieve these kind of results is being done by the people that you believe are capable of doing it?
That's correct. I know that, for example, when I talk to Nima, or when I talk to Juan Maldacena, or when I've talked to Natty Seiberg, these people are absolutely brilliant. And they don't know the answer unless they're the greatest actors I've ever seen.
So those brilliant physicists are looking at these supposed videos. What is the best, most compelling?
UFO stuff.
What are you talking about then?
They're not talking about things that can extend Einstein.
Right.
Therefore, to get back to your technology question, might have engineering applications, because it's the engineering applications that are terrifying.
Right.
The discovery of the neutron was one thing. The Teller-Ulam design was its weaponization. So suddenly, you can do the Tsar bomb or Castle Bravo, these unbelievable explosions, which, like, the difference between there were Civil War veterans who saw action in the Civil War who lived to see Ivy Mike in the Pacific. So the Civil War was almost a thermonuclear war in terms of human scale. It's less than 100 years different. People have forgotten how terrifying, important, wonderful, jaw-dropping, and awesome physics is because it hasn't done anything that completely screws your mind.
Like Hiroshima or Nagasaki.
Or Castle Bravo.
With Castle Bravo.
That was the test in the Pacific where we thought it was going to be like controlled and like, or what is it, Starfish, where we did an atmospheric explosion over Hawaii, and then the Russians like, hold my beer, Nova Zemlya.
Yeah.
You know, we remember I'm the guy 5 years ago who was saying we need above ground nuclear tests because all you people have lost your fear. Like, yes, Eric is crazy, but he's correct.
What's this one? That's Castle Bravo. Oh my God.
Right. Like,
so they detonated it in that facility and they expected it to be far smaller than it was?
You know, they detonated in the Pacific.
Right. But it's right next to that facility that was in the video.
Yeah.
Was that the facility that was initially filmed? Like,
yeah.
What is this facility?
That's it. It was Inawak, I forget, Atoll. So, like,
it's crazy how long ago that was and how close it was to the Civil War, if you really put it in that context.
Well, this is what I'm trying to say is what I'm trying to tell you.
Look at that. That's so insane.
Have you done this in Oculus?
No, I have not.
I highly recommend. If they're not going to do a nuke above ground so that we can save ourselves by fear.
Oh, look at that.
Right, this is religious stuff, Joe.
Yeah, it is religious
like
stuff.
we have announced, if somebody is listening to these tests that we did, my belief is very shortly before you get the ability to traverse the cosmos, if that is possible, you let off a nuke. Right? It's like, you know, you've had kids. There's some stuff that happens right before they figure out how to break out of the crib.
You know, that's part UFO folklore,
I know.
too. Fat Man and Little Boy. That's a big part of UFO. That once they dropped those, that's when all the UFOs started appearing.
So the question is, you know, the analogy I give, so I talked to Avi about the following thing. I am a fan of something I call the doubly scientific method. The usual scientific method makes a hidden assumption that it never voices, which is if we're going to study orcas, we assume that we are smarter than orcas. Or if we're going to study cephalopods, right, like an octopus, we think we're smarter. And what do? We disguise ourselves. We create artificial environments. We do all sorts of crazy things based on the fact that we're smarter than what we study, from everything from rocks to orcas. The doubly scientific method says, okay, assume that you're studying a rat in a maze, but you yourself are the rat in somebody else's maze. Now you have to look up the intelligence scale, not just down. And in the doubly scientific method, you have to assume that whatever is studying you is hiding from you the way you are hiding from your subjects. So if you see somebody in a duck blind, for example, and he's studying ducks, you understand that somebody may be hiding from you. And they might be able to use multiple dimensions of time. They might be able to cloak themselves and disguise themselves. Or for example, if you take microscopic UFOs, this cup has a radius of r and a circumference of 2 pi r. The disk that it spans is pi r squared in area. But if you look at this cup, it's much larger than pi r squared because we pushed it out. You could have a sphere where if you could cheaply engineer space-time, not through the Einstein field equations, but through the successor theory that recovers Einstein, you could have an entire stadium inside of a tennis ball. Just the way this cup doesn't blow your mind until you realize that its area is much greater than pi r squared. Why look for a giant floating thing in the sky? If you could bend space and time and you could play with the rulers the way I'm saying, I would put this in a tiny little profile.
Whoa. So we're only looking at, in terms of our understanding of the distance between objects, planets, gravity. We're looking at that. All that stuff where if it didn't exist, if somehow or another we lived in some contained environment and we had no concept of space whatsoever, and then we gained access to it, we would be unbelievably overwhelmed. If you lived in some sort of underground facility your entire life,
love this,
and then one day you got a chance to go outside and see the Keck Observatory in Hawaii, in a clear night with no moon, you would be overwhelmed. You wouldn't be able to believe that the world was as big as it really was, or that the universe was as big as it was.
Yeah, impedance mismatch. If you watch meteor showers the way my family does, it's religious. It's transformational. It's transcendent. Yeah. The problem, as you know, from the default mode network, right, is that mostly what your brain is doing is not communicating information, but screening. Right, your eyes, your fovea is precious because that's the thing that can resolve at very high levels.
Yeah.
But like, I can barely see Jamie out of the corner of my eye because my peripheral vision can't be at the same level as my fovea. I'd be overwhelmed.
Right.
So we're talking about tapping in to a picture of the world that we are not. Our brain is not prepared for the idea that time is multidimensional. That was the whole point of giving Lex another watch. We don't have a way to think about, I'll meet you at 5:15 and 12:30, according to two different scales of time. Or, for example, time and space, if I'm correct, the 14-dimensional manifold that has all the quantum going on it is split probably 7 and 7 dimensions, because we have 6 extra time dimensions and 4 extra space. Add 6 to 1 and 3 to 4, and you get 7. So space and time are interchangeable. There's a duality between them. All of this stuff is like, okay, it's how you hit on chicks in a bar. Hey, let me tell you something about space and time you never thought about.
Oh my God.
But what worked for me?
Do you think, now when you were talking about these people that keep mananaing you and not giving you access to whatever they're talking about, do you think they're talking about some sort of an engineering solution to this type of technology?
I haven't met in striking distance in 3 years.
So how do you have something that you don't, that's going to change your way of looking? Is it possible that you've missed something?
Must be wrong. First of all, like this is my life's work.
What's
right?
the way they raised it to you? About it changing the way you see the world.
Eric, I'll complain about data and like, that's not the data we have. What we've been showing the public is downsampled, meaning that it's fuzzier, it's low resolution. Like, how clear is it? As clear as you want. How clear are you that there's something to see? You can see it with your own eyes. There's no question.
Dude, if I was just shut the fuck up and let them show me, I'd be like, let's go.
I'm not any NDA.
I'm saying,
But you want to know in a different look. My life's work is a theory. It's one theory. My entire life is really about one theory. Okay? Like I do this entertainment thing and I talk to people and all this stuff. Bullshit. Really what I am is an academic who realized that you can't do academics inside of the university system and watch it disintegrate into madness as we speak. I figured this out a long time ago. I want to know whether this is right or wrong so much better, so much more than I want to know whether UFOs exist. UFOs, to me, are an indication of whether I'm right or wrong. You see, it's data. It's an input to me.
mm-hmm.
Because
so if you're right, that means
if future, it means we can leave not the planet but the solar system. We can explore. The cosmos are traversable. If we can leave, anything else can visit. If you look at the entirety of the universe and you imagine that ultimately there are societies that destroy themselves because they get atomic weapons before they figure out how to leave. Some societies are smarter than that. And they'll be able to leave and colonize the cosmos. And for them not to be here,
they're, an established animal. To have like some cryptozoological creature like Bigfoot that's undetected. But it's fun.
It's fun.
I want to believe.
Yeah.
But I don't really.
Well, that's like in the ocean. Like they find some big fish, or some big, like extra, like some, and you're like, I don't know, dude, we never knew it was down there.
There's two.
Well, don't they think aliens could live in the ocean? So, I mean,
yes.
That's how much.
That was Jeremy Corbs talking about that the other day. That they, it's hard to say like what kind of information he's getting, how accurate it is. But they're basically saying, think about the movie Abyss, where the aliens lived underwater. He was like, that's probably what's going on.
Yeah.
That there's some sort of alien base underwater or some meeting place, or that's where they hide. That's where they go to be undetected.
Do you think you're going to see it in your lifetime?
Bigfoot or aliens?
Aliens. Like, where it's like, oh, like we have to like talk to them now. We have to like interact with them.
There's a video that is impossible to ignore. There's some things that are impossible to ignore. And then there's eyewitness testimonies of people who are rock solid, totally dependable, like fighter pilots who have seen some things. Like the best examples, this guy, Commander David Fravor, who was off the coast of San Diego in 2004. And this is corroborated by multiple points of data. They had this this tracking system that tracks things above Earth's atmosphere, and they found this thing went from above 60,000 feet above sea level to 50 feet above sea level in less than a second. They have no idea how it's doing this. They have no idea. There's no method of propulsion that's visible. They followed this thing. They locked onto it. It blocked their radar. It blocked their tracking systems, rather. And then it jetted off at an impossible rate of speed. And then the Nimitz relocated this thing at their cat point. The cat point is where the fighter pilots, when they're doing this test, they're doing this exercise, they were supposed to meet at this very specific point. And that's where this thing had gone. Like this thing had read their manifest and knew, like, or read their plans and knew where they were going.
What's wild?
That is way more compelling to me than Bigfoot. The Bigfoot thing is just fun, but the alien thing is fun and likely. There's something going on. And so I go back and forth. Sometimes I think maybe it's some sort of government drone that's like so sophisticated and it's totally top secret. And if we ever go to war with China, that's when they're going to break it out. And then sometimes I think what they are is something that's monitoring us and making sure we don't blow ourselves up, making sure that we make this journey from territorial apes with thermonuclear weapons into some sort of an advanced intergalactic society, and that there's a very crucial moment where the instincts of these tribal people, which is all of us, all human beings, are these tribal territorial people, where you have to keep them from sabotaging any possible future progress by blowing themselves up, by killing each other, by
what if we told them and then then when you say that they go, yeah, that was it. Is that easy? Like, not that easy, but like you just go, is that it? And you go,
yeah,
that's about it.
We're trying to keep you guys from blowing yourselves up. This is like, but maybe that's like the natural thing that you see. Like when civilizations advance, like there's a very precarious moment where like they have the capability of blowing themselves up, but the reason and the logic to not do it, but they also have these instincts to control resources and take over territories. They still have those instincts, but they have to bypass that. They have to figure out how to, and so that's when aliens start circling and just keeping an eye on us.
Yeah.
That's the primary.
I mean, that's what you hope, right? Instead of like them attacking us.
Yes.
Because then
I think if they were going to attack us, they would have already done it. Like if they really could do all those things, they could probably take out our power grid pretty easy. Apparently, the stories are that they're able to shut down nuclear launches and nuclear facilities, and that they do that, and they hover over military bases, and that they just shut everything down just to let you know, hey, bitch, I can
that's
just
wild.
flip that switch. So
yeah, crazy.
Is landing or crashing around the world, and unexpected countries have had this happen, and that's why I picked that, because I thought that was a interesting case. And then of course Pope Pius XII and the Vatican were involved, back channeling it through the OSS, which became the CIA later, to FDR, and that's how the U.S. knew something weird happened in Italy right before World War II. But
so this 33 was the first documented.
That is the earliest one I can talk about. Yeah,
There's something that predates that.
You could infer that. Yeah.
So this 33 one you said was in Italy?
Yeah, magenta. So it's I'm bad at geography. I think that's like a Lombardy region. It's like northwest Italy.
And what's the story behind it?
So basically it looked like it crashed, right? The original shape most likely was like a lenticular disc-like craft, with like two dinner plates.
What
right?
does lent to mean?
So like two dinner plates, smushed together, right? The hump, and there's like a like a bubble on top.
Like the classic,
saucer, like that.
Like that. Okay.
But it looks like when it hits, the edges broke off, so it became this like bell or acorn shaped thing. and there was nothing in it. It was like just an artifact. You know, there was no biological remnants, if you will. So it's so funny because the Italians were so confused. They actually called up the Germans and they were like, is this one of your Wunderwaffe? Like, what the hell just crashed in northern Italy? Mussolini. And this is all publicly available information because some Italian researchers found all these original documents that some people were sitting on for years in Italy. They put a gag order on the press, etc. And Mussolini asked the Germans to come down. And of course, the Germans came down and they were like, that is not ours, but let's look at it together. So that's kind of perhaps a tertiary reason the kind of Axis powers got together. I'm not saying that's like the reason, but I think the Italians and the Germans were so intrigued with what they found from like an artifact perspective. There was at least some scientific and military collaboration during the war, the details of which I'm not sure of, but I know people that know that specific event that are currently still intel officers within this program in detail. But
So were there witnesses to the crash or some sort of an understanding that something had crash landed and then they discovered it?
Yeah, I forget the precise discovery. I don't know if it was like local police officers or local farmers found it in the field, something like that. I don't want to misspeak. I assume some of the Italian researchers might have some fact witnesses that can orally say, "Oh yeah, my great grandfather found it" or something like that. But I don't remember.
And what was the style of this vehicle?
It was probably like 20 feet by 10 feet, something like that. Not super huge, but kind of big.
Do they think this was a drone? Do they think that this was occupied?
There was nothing in it. So if it was piloted, if you will, by some sentience, I mean, your guess is as good as mine.
So what happened to that vehicle?
So we knew where it was being stored at a particular location after the crash, and then the military came in and we grabbed it towards the end of the war, 1944, 1945, because, like I said, Pope Pius XII already kind of let FDR know.
Why the involved? Because in Italy?
Well, interestingly enough, there's like a whole history of human intelligence prior to World War II and old money, the Vatican, the Italian mob, kind of the old country boys did a lot of informal intelligence collection for the U.S. And there's probably some books you can read on it, but it's really interesting. Human intelligence collection wasn't really formalized until the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, which became the CIA in 1947. You had Paul Mellon and all these other affluent guys of all these old money families that basically created the CIA. So that's probably the reason why.
So this thing that was recovered, this was the first documented one that the United States had access to?
I can't get into the first or not, but it was an early one. Yeah.
So it's almost 100 years ago.
Yes.
And so they take this thing and then they bring it where?
Yeah, I can't get into those.
Can't get into that.
No.
Okay. They bring it somewhere in the United States. And was the attempt to try to back engineer this thing? Was the attempt to try to understand what it was?
I mean, first of it, obviously, it's understanding the situation, right? What do we have our hands on? And like I've said in some other videos and stuff, we took the Manhattan Project secrecy and overlaid it on this issue because that secrecy worked well for atomic bomb developments and whatnots. And certainly this whole program in a nutshell, if I were to summarize the 90 plus years of history, it is a reverse engineering program to garner some kind of insight. And of course, not a lot of the things that we've learned from it are directly, ripped off the technology we found, but it has inspired other innovations that made its way into other U.S. classified programs over the year for national defense reasons, and it's a myriad of different things. So
the UFO folklore is that this is where fiber optics were discovered first.
Yeah, going to break the seal on anything we've discovered or anything like that. And yeah, it's a place I can't go to.
How limited
yeah.
are you
Yeah.
in what you can discuss and what you can't discuss, and why?
Yeah.
Why do they let you discuss any of this?
Yeah, so anything sensitive that I want to say as it relates to like U.S. government activity, whether it be intelligence stuff, military stuff, etc., I have to submit it through what they call DOPSR, DoD Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review. That is something anybody who's been an intel officer, anybody with like a clearance, has to submit that kind of stuff. Now, obviously, if you're writing a book about gardening, you don't have to. But if you're going to talk about anything military and intelligence related, you have to submit. So it's kind of a catch-22 for this office, right? They're only looking at it from a security perspective. They're not vouching for it or anything like that. And that's like any author, right? They could write a book about Navy SEALs and they're not vouching for the story. They're vouching that you didn't say any nasty code words. You didn't burn a specific ongoing classified program. And for them, I mean, I'm not in their OODA loop, but certainly it's a catch-22 for them where if they want to redact and they propose a redaction, they're like, hey, Dave, you can't say these sentences. You can rewrite it and resubmit. You know, we can't necessarily tell you what agency said to redact it, but you're not allowed to say this. They would be basically self-certifying there's a there. So in my opinion, probably the policy is like, if it has to deal with the subject, we're not saying anything. We're not proposing any redactions. As long as he's not burning a conventional program, we kind of have to allow him to exercise his First Amendment rights. And so I think it's like a catch-22 for that office is kind of the short of the long answer. So
this is essentially one of the very early ones, 1933. Mm-hmm. How many crash retrieval incidents have there been?
It is double digit. The specific numbers I do know, however, I can't discuss that. And I know it sounds like, oh, I'm being coy or whatever, but you know, this show, any other interviews I do, right? You know, foreign intelligence services are watching, and it's like, I'm not here to help Russia and China calibrate their intelligence collection. Like, oh, Dave said it's this number. We missed a couple. Shit. Let's put it out for the KGB, SVR, and GRU are now going to hit the streets to try to figure out which ones they missed. So I'm here to protect national security, and I'm just trying to put all the general topics out there for public conversation to hold our government accountable, really. So, because I'm here as a fact witness, because we have a constitutional oversight issue, because this program has not been reported to Congress in the appropriate way, and I can get into a senator I talked to that has died recently, so I can, explain to you why I'm so sure. Besides what I read, which we can get into what intel reports I read, I did get some stuff cleared. So during my investigation, I'm like, you know what? I need to talk to somebody at the highest levels, right? So, and this will give you an idea of the kind of people we talk to. And this is the only one I'm going to talk about using their name because they died 2 years ago. So in spring 2021, I actually flew with a couple colleagues of mine to Las Vegas. And I met with Senator Harry Reid about 9 months before he died. And of course, he's a private citizen now. And I wanted to brief him on the topic, and I wanted to get his kind of thought leadership on it because, he was a Gang of Eight member, right? Which is the top most cleared senators and congressmen. He was the majority leader, for God's sakes, of the Senate. And I knew, he helped sponsor the OSAP program that I mentioned, and where they looked at Skinwalker Ranch and some other things. And I wanted to understand, like, what does Harry Reid actually know? Like, why did he give $21 million to DIA and Bigelow Aerospace for this? So I'm sitting there in Harry Reid's living room, right next to him with some other witnesses that were there with me. And he straight up says, he's like, yeah, I knew we had UFO material. I was denied access for decades. I tried to get access. And then he explained some of his efforts during OSAP. And I was like, holy shit, did the former majority leader just say, did he just confirm this to me as well? I was already talking to these amazing high-level people, but I have Harry Reid literally saying, yes, we have material, and, he knew it was non-human.
Did Harry have personal experience with this?
I don't know if he's had any personal stuff in his personal life.
I mean, did he see it? Did he?
He said, in terms of seeing the material himself, he said he was denied access for years, decades was his term. And he actually told me, on behalf of me, he was going, so he had like a weekly call with President Joe Biden at the time. And he straight up said to me he was going to talk to President Biden about this issue, literally. And then what he was telling me about OSAP, I was like, holy shit, I have like 20 other people that told me this, dude. So the real history, what fucking OSAP was, because I think there's a lot of people out there that think they were looking at ghosts, Skinwalker Ranch. Yes, they went to the ranch as a secondary and tertiary objective. But the real reason, so like there's a document that came out a couple years ago through FOIA from the Defense Intelligence Agency. There was this special access program request that Harry Reid, you might have seen this, I think like George Knapp and company have reported on this, that he sent to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, William Lynn. And it was asking for one of the most serious SAPs you can ask for, what they call a bigoted, waived special access program. So waived means it's limited congressional reporting. That is a class of special access programs. And bigoted means it's like by name. And it's like, it was like, you can read the FOIA document. It was like, Harry Reid, James Inhofe, Lou Elizondo, etc. And I'm like, why are you asking for the most serious SAP to be created for a program that ostensibly is looking at Skinwalker Ranch and stuff? And it doesn't make any sense. So what really happened there, and Harry Reid, God bless his soul, made this disclosure a couple weeks after we met in the New Yorker, and you can look this up. I think it was like a May 2021 New Yorker story where he says, I knew for decades, and he made this disclosure, not me, so I'm going to say the name of the contractor. Harry Reid said this. We knew that Lockheed Martin had this material for decades. I tried to get access and I was denied. And specifically with the Lockheed Martin stuff, he was talking about during the OSAP program. And for the people who are on this program, I submitted this shit to the officer, got this cleared, so don't freak out, but I'm telling the truth here. So Lockheed Martin wanted to divest itself from this material at a specific facility that's known to me, that I provided to the Inspector General, like street address, all that shit, right? And the idea was if they made a catcher's mitt, a security catcher's mitt for this shit, most serious SAP possible, the contractor and the other government customer, which was the Central Intelligence Agency, for that specific Lockheed material. And it was shit that they recovered from like the 50s and stuff. And it was like bits and pieces of like hull structure, shit like that. And so they were going to tech transfer it. And the $21 or $22 million was actually for Bigelow Aerospace to build out, facilities in Las Vegas and material analysis equipment. And I saw the staff meeting slides. I saw the paperwork. Like there's a paperwork trail I've seen on this shit. And I talked to the people involved in this program.